Falls, and welcome to our regular City Council meeting for Monday, April 5th, 2021. I'll now call this meeting to order with a roll call from Madam Clerk.
Miller.
Here.
DeBoer.
Here.
Cruz.
Here.
Harding.
Here.
Dara.
Here.
Sires.
Here.
Dunn.
Here.
All members are present, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. First item is approval of minutes. Is there a motion to approve the regular meeting of March 15th, 2021?
So moved.
It's been motioned,
Second.
seconded. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? That passes, and that moves us over into agenda revisions. Do we have any tonight, Madam Clerk?
I have no agenda revisions, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Going forward into public forum, speakers will have one opportunity to speak for up to 5 minutes on topics germane to city business. Does anyone from the public in the gallery wish to speak tonight? Is it Mr. Kittrell? No? Okay. You, Mr. Batspan, just provide name and address for the record, please, sir.
All right, 3831 Convair Lane, Cedar Falls, Iowa. Now I'm going to kind of talk about why you should really be listening to me when it comes to all this parking issue on the Hill. And we just talked about that. You know, when you look at the visioning plan, you got to look at it and exercise your judgment. And that's kind of what was being bandied about in committee of the whole was, well, do we have to do all of this? You know, what does it mean if we adopt the visioning plan? And I don't think Councilman Dara is wrong that you can have this visioning plan. I just really counsel you against adopting it whole piece, wholesale, and not making your really specific concerns known when it comes to what should be done first, what should be done second. And I think the idea of taking it in stages is great, but I just really fear that the course it's on right now, the first stage you're going to see is not beautification, it's not facade improvement. That's not going to be the first code revision you see. The first code revision is going to be reducing parking. That's going to be the first code revision so that the buildings can start going up. And then is the facade improvement going to happen? Is the beautification going to happen? Unknown. But those buildings will be up and the parking will be down. You know, we're looking again at a 50-year visioning plan that seeks immediate implementation of zoning changes that could cripple the College Hill area when a full review of the parking and zoning changes was only recently reviewed a year and a half ago. And so why not focus on implementing the parking study first? Why not, you know, we just heard, well, it depends, is the parking going to be a problem like it was caused by urban flats? Well, depends how you implement it, depends how you manage the parking. How about that? Those partnerships occur first. You've already got a parking study. It's not fully implemented. I doubt it, not even close from what I hear. Do that and then move on to maybe reducing parking if those partnerships, if that better management with the university doesn't yield the results. But again, this revision, even though it's on page 89 in the last page of the appendix, it's obvious what's going to be happening. Parking ratios are going to be brought down as quickly as possible. Prioritize what you've already done. You changed the code 2 years ago. Don't change it yet until it's proven that it's unworkable. They're just telling you that it doesn't work for the size buildings these guys want to build. But you don't know where it's at. You don't know what these further parking management implementations are going to do. You know, and again, when it comes to the point of why listen to us, concerned college citizens for College Hill, who was up here telling you that urban flats was a great idea with zero parking and they were going to make everyone sign an agreement that they were going to have a spot somewhere on campus and they weren't going to be parking behind the building? Developers, and it was very well applauded by the College Hill Partnership. Who was telling you that was a bad idea? Us. Who came in and with your Who came in and said that the building proposed that was 100 parking spaces too short and was this close to getting passed was a terrible idea? Us. And thankfully, everyone saw it as the clear interpretation of the code showed that it was improper. So that's why you should listen to us. College Hill Partnership has great vision, but it's all about building exactly what its membership wants and the consequences be disregarded. And the number one example there is urban flats. Resigned to parking being a problem, or parking is always going to be a problem, it's a huge problem. It's not a huge problem now. But if you cut the ratios in half without first implementing the steps the parking study says to implement, yes. The only reason I'm up here yakking is because 2 years after you changed the parking, you want to change it again. Not you, but that is what is being put forth. Do not be fooled. This is going to be the top priority when it goes back to P&Z, is reducing that parking. It is the hidden Trojan horse top priority of this study, is to reduce parking for the biggest buildings at the lowest cost for the developers. And the rest of it is good dressing. I hope it takes place in concurrent fashion with the redevelopment, but my gut tells me it's going to be parking reduction first, big buildings second, and the rest of it, maybe we'll get to it later. Tell them it's all got to be right together as a package, or maybe first finish chewing what you already bit off with the first parking study before you go about new reductions and new projects and redevelopment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vashbe. Other speakers from the gallery tonight? Mr. Fine?
TJ Frine, 1319 Austin Way. Talk about something drastically different. Between July 1st, 2019 and June 30th, 2020, the city of Cedar Falls spent $16,000 on city lobbyists. That kind of reared its ugly head recently with the legislation that was down in Des Moines. But one of the lobbyists, actually both of them, one is a city council member in Johnston, doesn't live in Cedar Falls. One is also a career lobbyist, or that's what he does for a living, it appears, and lives in West Des Moines. So we're using city lobbyists to lobby maybe based on council goals or whatnot, according to a document I saw. But we've all seen issues come up that have so drastically divided this community. I think of things like the roundabouts, the fire department issue, continued roundabouts, Main Street redevelopment. Those all divide our community, but then in turn we have lobbyists lobbying for certain things in certain directions, when the tax dollars for the people that may or may not agree with the lobbyists, it's the same amount for somebody that may support the lobbyists or their movement or their direction they want to go. So my question would be, why, first of all, why are we sending $16,000 to a couple of towns, not even within 2 hours of Cedar Falls? Who should our lobbyists be? Well, our lobbyists should be you guys, our elected mayor, our council. That's what they're tasked to do, is do what's best for the city of Cedar Falls. Now, it's regardless of issue. Issue doesn't matter to me. In this regard, it was the one recent issue that was brought forward that kind of reared its ugly head and brought this to light for me. Lobbyists should be lobbying for issues that are, without a doubt, benefit all citizens of Cedar Falls. When I think of issues that benefit all citizens of Cedar Falls, I think of things like highway redesign, COVID relief, those sort of things. I don't think of issues that so drastically divide our community. Again, we have an elected mayor, an elected council. If you want to lobby, head to Des Moines. Again, we're paying lobbyists that don't live in Cedar Falls, probably don't spend a dime of money in Cedar Falls, living where they live. Maybe they come and visit, but we're talking over 2 hours away, and we're sending $16,000 to another council member that is in a different community outside of Des Moines. We have our own council members. Let's get them to Des Moines. Let's get them lobbying for what's best of Cedar Falls. Now, $16,000. It was recently, within a year or so ago, that somebody mentioned the fact that we had an employee making a significant amount of overtime, but he didn't live in Cedar Falls. True. We're sending $16,000 to Des Moines. They don't live in Cedar Falls, but that's no big deal. Again, $16,000 in the city budget is a drop in the bucket, but too many drops in the bucket overflows the bucket. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Prime. Other speakers for public comment? Yes, ma'am. Name and address for the record.
My name is Catherine Sogard. I live at 330 Columbia Circle in Waterloo. I'm the executive director of the College Hill Partnership. Again, I'd like to remind you to head up to College Hill. The university students worked hard today to decorate the windows for their homecoming. That's 2020.5 because we couldn't have it in the fall. So I'd invite you to go up there and take a look at the windows. They did a really great job. The other thing is I would like to correct the record a little bit. Our partnership has been around since 2008. We merged with a neighborhood association and a business association then. Used to be the College Hill Neighborhood Association and the College Hill Merchants Association. Our association specifically has board members that represent specific parts of our constituency because of that merger. So I just really want to make sure that the record is corrected. We have 2 spots on our board that are represented by landlords that own property within the College Hill overlay, 2 that represent businesses who own businesses on College Hill, and 2 that represent people who live within the College Hill overlay. We also have 4 at-large members, and we also have, traditionally it's the NISG president, but if their class schedule doesn't fit with our board meeting schedule, they send a representative from NISG. So I just wanted to make sure that you are all well aware that we do not represent solely the voice of the developers on College Hill, and I think that just needed to be made clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sogard. Any other speakers for public comment from the gallery or from Zoom?
We got a few, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor,
We're in public comment now.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to comment on one.
No, Mr. Cruz, we're in public comment or in public forum. So it's not a time for council members to, or me to jump into conversations.
The first number, Mr. Mayor, is ending in 0467.
0467. So you have the floor. Name and address for the record, please.
Ending in 0467. 0467. So you have the floor. Name and address for the record, please.
Jim Skane, 2215 Clay Street, Cedar Falls. Jim Skane.
And Mr. Skane, if you could please turn down the volume on your television, your device, that'll keep us from getting echo, sir. We want to make sure we hear you loud and clear.
Thank you.
Okay, and I'll restart your time.
Okay. Yes. I want to talk about the agenda because for the last several meetings we've been talking about having the agenda comply with Robert's Rules of Order, version 12, and each time the agenda comes out, it does not comply. And this particular agenda is very clear in its noncompliance. First, it has the area of the one voting on the agenda as being by one vote, unless someone wants to talk about an agenda item. This completely contrary to version 12, because version 12 says each agenda item should be considered separately, and the wording of the motion should be displayed. We don't get the wording of the motion displayed. All we get is the title that the agenda has, but we do not know what the motion contains. So that's one area that violates. Another area that violates is the fact that the public is only permitted to have one or two items that they can pull when there are many more that should be pulled. Another area is, again, the issue of germane. The way that the city uses germane is completely contrary to what Robert recommends. Robert says germane applies to amendments and to amendments to the amendment, but not to the speech that people make. We are in a situation now where the promised changes have not materialized, and the city is continuing its anti-transparency approach. We have 35 items on the agenda, and the vast majority of them will not see the light of day. On the agenda, there is that particularly important agenda item 34 that attempts to create an ordinance with regard to the memo that was presented about the mayor's duties and the city administrator's duties. That agenda item is very important, and I don't think that it should be put into an ordinance at this time.
1 minute remaining, sir.
But in any case, I would hope, Mayor Green, that future agenda would be more consistent with what you promised when version 12 of Roberts was adopted. And I look forward to changes in the agenda on the 19th. Thank you for your comments, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Skane. Do we have anyone else for public comment from Zoom?
The next available speaker is Tammy, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so with that, I believe that's for a proclamation. So if we have others, let me just check that real quick here. Yeah, so we do have a proclamation to read that she'll be a part of for Tammy Turner. So I'll hold off on that if we have other speakers first. And if, Tammy, if you had something that you wanted to say for public comment, we'll allow that once we're in special presentations if I miss you there. So any other speakers for public comment tonight? Or public forum?
The next available speaker is Leanne.
Okay, so Leanne Saul, you have the floor, ma'am.
Hi, Leanne Saul, 1825 Green Hill Road, Cedar Falls, Iowa. And I just want to say that without a vision, the people perish. We need a vision for the College Hill Partnership in that area. I think it's a very exciting plan. I think the consultants have done a great job. They put a lot of thought and a lot of detail. And as a city, we don't have to adopt everything. The parking ratios do not have to be adopted. Let planning and zoning do their work to present to the council. But I believe that if we do not move forward with some sort of visioning plan for that area, it will just die on the vine, and we don't want that in Cedar Falls. Cedar Falls has a history of looking ahead and planning ahead, and I just feel like this is a good plan. Sure, it needs to be tweaked. Let's tweak it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Saul. Other speakers from Zoom?
The next speaker is Andrea, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so Andrea, if you could provide name and address for the record, please. You have 5 minutes.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead, ma'am.
Okay, hi. Andrea Geary, 1816 Tremont Street, Cedar Falls. I'm speaking tonight to express my dismay and concern over the inherently flawed process used by the city and the consultants in the visioning process, both for College Hill and also downtown Main Street, which, as you know, the visioning process is designed to result in recommendations for how to write planning and zoning code. The city of Cedar Falls last updated its zoning code 51 years ago, 1970. So if we can judge by history here on this one, potentially we're moving forward with a process for rewriting our zoning code that may last several more decades, and seems to have been conducted without any intentional involvement from historically marginalized people, Black, Indigenous people of color specifically. I brought my concerns to planning and zoning at the last 2 meetings, where it was admitted by planning and zoning that no intentional outreach was made to these populations. Further, after my concerns were somewhat taken to heart, one of the commissioners asked quite genuinely, how would we even go about that? And a bit taken aback myself, I'll admit, I didn't offer much of a valuable solution other than directly reaching out to Black, Indigenous people of color. But after reflecting, I think what we as a city really need to realize is that we don't have any non-white decision makers in the administration. We don't have any non-white people involved in this process for the visioning, the Imagine College Hill or Main Street. And furthermore, we don't have existing structure or relationships for how to bring Black, Indigenous people of color into the fold. Those mechanisms don't exist. Because I haven't received any answers to my many questions or any show of good faith from the city government that they intend to make moves on correcting their errors, I just have to say, as a matter of public record, it's extremely concerning to me that the city of Cedar Falls seems very okay with moving forward with this plan and the inherently flawed process it's been conducted through. And just in closing, I want to say that, the city can't expect for people who have very intentionally been oppressed and excluded from making decisions in a systemic way for hundreds of years to feel legitimately welcome or valued by simply receiving a postcard requesting feedback on an issue. They have learned quite legitimately to not trust the process, and as a city, we're once again proving to them why we should not be trusted. I'm saddened, and quite frankly, a city that I've loved for a long time, I'm kind of disappointed to say that I'm from here. And so I'm deploring you, please, give this some attention, figure out what the city needs to do to bring all people into the fold now, and most certainly, potentially, for the next 51 years. And I'll close with that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Geary. Other speakers for public comment?
The final speaker, Mr. Mayor, is Jeremy.
Okay, so Jeremy, name and address for the record, please, sir.
Anyway, so as I'm getting bombarded by other distractions.
So is this
I've addressed this
Mr.
to council
Salentic?
about this.
If you could provide name and address for the record,
Yes.
please.
I'm sorry, I guess I didn't realize you didn't hear. Jeremy Salentic, 1008 Rockland Street.
Thanks, sir.
Okay, so I addressed the council about this before, involving the crosswalk out here in North Cedar. At that time, they had switched it over from a regular standard stoplight to a flashing yellow light when you press the crosswalk. And now apparently it's been changed over to a strobing light. And the incident we had here this Sunday was my wife took the children down to play at the playground at the school. And on the way back, my 11-year-old decided he wanted to ride his bike home, so she followed him. He pressed that button at the crosswalk, and those strobes came on, and only one person stopped. Every car went through, one motorcycle stopped. Now, this is an issue. I don't know if we can do something like they did on Waterloo Road and put one of those cones out there that says it's a law, you have to stop for these kids that are crossing the road. I don't know if it's an issue during, school in and out. Obviously, there's a lot more traffic then going in and out of the school. But during these weekend times, people just aren't even paying attention. They're just zooming right through. If he wouldn't have been paying attention, he could have been hit by a car. I almost think it would be better to go back to the standard stoplight out here. And on a little bit of a whimsical note, I don't know, maybe we need to have an independent study done. All right, that's all I got.
Thank you, Mr. Salentic. So seeing no others for public comment tonight, or public forum, and none in the gallery, I will close the public forum and move us into special presentations. So I have a few tonight. April is a busy proclamation month, all worthy of attention. The first one I have is proclamation for Sexual Assault Awareness Month, which is April 2021. Whereas sexual assault affects people of all backgrounds, including age, race, cultural background, gender identity, sexual orientation, economic status, level of physical or cognitive abilities, and whereas sexual assault is one of the least reported crimes and can be devastating to survivors as well as family, friends, and the whole community. And whereas, in addition to the immediate physical and emotional costs, sexual assault leaves victims with long-term issues of post-traumatic stress disorder, substance abuse, depression, homelessness, eating disorders, and suicide. And whereas no single person, organization, or community can eliminate sexual assault alone, so all must work together to educate the entire population about what can be done to prevent sexual assault, support survivors and their significant others, and support agencies providing services to survivors. And whereas agencies like Riverview Center, Friends of the Family, and Waypoint Services are dedicated to educating the public about sexual assault and helping survivors of sexual assault and their families. Now therefore, I, Robert M. Green, Mayor of Cedar Falls, do hereby proclaim April 2021 as Sexual Assault Awareness Month throughout the city and encourage all citizens to advocate for survivors of sexual assault and to contribute to agencies working to end the societal scourge of sexual assault. Signed this 30th day of March 2021. And tonight, do we have a representative for Riverview Conference? Yes, ma'am, please come forward. And if you have a few words for us tonight.
Sure. Thank you. My name is Gwen Bramlett-Hecker. I am the Iowa Program Director for Riverview Center. Here in the Cedar Valley, we have two offices. One is in downtown Waterloo, and the other is on the UNI campus. We are the organization accredited by the Iowa Attorney General's Office to provide sexual assault support services here in the Cedar Valley, as well as 14 other counties in Iowa. I do come to you with kind of a heavy heart in that we just closed out our books for March, and March was the busiest month we have had in terms of the support services that we've provided since we started collecting data on how many hours we have spent in services for survivors of sexual violence. One of the trends, there's multiple trends I could say, but one of the most, I think, startling trends and something that we all need to sort of consider and reflect on that we're finding since coming out of COVID is a very drastic trend of parents calling to seek support services for children who were sexually assaulted or sexually abused during quarantine. and during COVID. During COVID, we put our foot on the gas when it came to providing services because we had an idea what was going to happen once particularly children are removed from school counselors and teachers, when people stop going to the doctor's office, when people stop gathering with neighbors, churches, civic organizations like Girl Scout, Boy Scouts, those kind of things. Everything went kind of radio silent at the end of February last year. We saw kind of an explosion of services last October, and then again, we're seeing it again in March. So as we head into Sexual Assault Awareness Month, which is crazy busy anyway for the month, I also know that my team's going to be exhausted at the end of it because our workload is drastically increased over time. So I appreciate the proclamation, and I ask all of you to just keep an eye and an ear on those around you. Know that Riverview Center is here. We're 100% free and 100% confidential. And those go hand in hand because when a parent either can't afford services for their child, imagine that desperate feeling. I always think about that parent who can't get their child therapy when they've been sexually abused. Or when you have a situation where sexual abuse occurs in a family and they have to come up with payment, they lose control of their story and they end up having to tell people they aren't ready to tell yet. They don't have to do that when the services are free. We are in the schools, we're in all the public schools, many of the private schools, and very active in the community, though our services are very quiet since they're confidential. So anywho, thank you so much for listening to me, and please know we're here if any of you should ever need our services. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Our second proclamation is April 4th through 10th as National Library Week. And we have Director Kelly Stern with us tonight, joining us for this. This reads, whereas April 4th through 10th, 2021 has been designated as National Library Week by the American Library Association with the theme of Welcome to Your Library. And whereas the citizens of Cedar Falls have valued library services since the community's earliest days, organizing a library society in 1859, just 7 years after incorporation. And whereas the public library continues to serve as a cornerstone and community living room for the people of our city, providing free and equal access to resources and information to all area residents, from toddlers to retirees. And whereas the Cedar Falls Public Library cultivates a love of learning, fosters the joy of reading, and has continually expanded its scope of services to include the lending of technology, board games, maker tools, and other useful items, the provision of free community Wi-Fi internet access, a variety of public lectures and workshops, and an extensive online catalog of downloadable books and audiobooks. Now, therefore, I, Robert M. Green, Mayor of Cedar Falls, do hereby proclaim April 4th through 10th, 2021 as National Library Week throughout the city and encourage citizens to exercise the privilege of obtaining and using a library card to explore, learn, and grow through the library's many services. Signed this 30th day of March 2021. The next we have is, what's that? Oh, I'm sorry, for Director Stern, if you have comments tonight.
I just wanted to say thank you to the Cedar Falls community for supporting and using the public library. We are here for you to provide information and recreational materials that you might need. So please do stop by this week, and if you don't have a library card, we would be glad to issue one for you so that you can start borrowing the extensive collections that your tax dollars support.
Thank you, Director Stern. Our next is Days of Remembrance for the Victims of the Holocaust, which is Sunday, April 4th to Sunday, April 11th, 2021. Whereas the Holocaust was the state-sponsored systematic annihilation of more than 6 million European Jews by Nazi Germany and its collaborators from 1933 to 1945, and whereas millions more victims, including Roma, Gypsies, Jehovah's Witnesses, Soviet prisoners of war and political dissidents, and gay and lesbian people also suffered grievous oppression and death under Nazi tyranny, and whereas it is vital to always remember the terrible events of the Holocaust and remain vigilant against hatred, persecution, and tyranny, while also actively promoting the principles of individual freedom and a just society. And whereas, pursuant to an act of Congress, the United States Holocaust Memorial Council has designated the Days of Remembrance of the Victims of the Holocaust to be Sunday, April 4th to Sunday, April 11th, 2021, including the Days of Remembrance known as Yom HaShoah on April 8th, 2021, Now therefore, I, Robert M. Green, Mayor of Cedar Falls, do hereby proclaim the week of April 4th to 11th, 2021 as Days of Remembrance for the victims of the Holocaust in Cedar Falls. And I encourage all citizens to remember the dead, honor the survivors, appreciate the rescuers and liberators, and strive to overcome intolerance and indifference through learning, empathy, and remembrance. Signed this 30th day of March, 2021. And our next is Citywide Cleanup Week. And tonight I am joined by Tammy Turner with Waste Track. She'll be talking briefly about the services at Waste Track during this event. And it says, Citywide Cleanup Week, April 18th to 24th, 2021. Very excited about this one. Whereas the proper disposal of trash, appliances, furniture, hazardous materials, and electronics is vital to the safety, health, and welfare of Cedar Falls residents, and whereas pristine parks, sidewalks, roadways, waterways, and public spaces are a great source of enjoyment and pride for residents and visitors alike, and whereas the city's neighborhood associations and service clubs have successfully carried out past spring cleanup events throughout the city, and these efforts are most worthy of celebration and duplication citywide, and whereas the City of Cedar Falls, the city's neighborhood associations, Green Iowa AmeriCorps, and other environmentally friendly civic groups are providing resources, education, and materials for a successful cleanup of the city. And whereas the Waste Track education team will be hosting a household hazardous materials and electronics drop-off event on Saturday, April 24th from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the Public Works Complex for proper disposal of hazardous items and electronics. Now therefore, I, Robert M. Green, Mayor of Cedar Falls, do hereby proclaim April 18th through 24th, 2021 as Citywide Cleanup Week throughout the city and encourage citizens to organize and participate in cleanup events and to take advantage of this opportunity to easily dispose of refuse, bulk items, electronics, and hazardous materials for the betterment of our city and the environment. Signed this 30th day of March, 2021. So with that, I'll turn it over to Tammy Turner with Waste Track. She has about a 1-minute presentation for us. So, Ms. Turner, you have the floor.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much, Mayor Green. I am Tammy Turner with the Waste Track Education Team.
And Ms. Turner, you're a little bit faint. I don't know if there's a way to turn up your mic input. Okay, we're having some difficulty with that. So if we can't, we would be able to give this part, yeah, still very faint. So I think since this event, or this part of the event is going to be on the 24th, I'd like to hold this one until our next meeting when we can hear you clearly.
Sounds good.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. So with that, the last proclamation I have tonight is Fair Housing Act proclamation, and that one reads, whereas April 2021 marks the 53rd anniversary of Title VIII of the Civil Rights Act of 1968, known as the Fair Rights Housing Act, and whereas this act provides equal opportunity for all Americans regardless of race, color, religion, gender, disability, familial status, national origin, and requires fair practice in property sales, rental, and financing. And whereas the Fair Housing Amendments Act added new rights, remedies, monetary penalties, and strengthened enforcement procedures to provide better accountability for equal housing opportunities. And whereas the Fair Housing Amendments Act seeks to provide equal housing opportunities, affirmatively further housing choices, eliminate legal barriers to equal housing, and emphasize equal housing as a basic human right for all. And whereas the City of Cedar Falls and its real estate partners are committed to the principles and intent of the Fair Housing Act, knowing that housing can greatly impact identity, sense of self-worth, the building of long-term wealth, and the development of the social connections which allow people to prosper. Now therefore, I, Robert M. Green, Mayor of Cedar Falls, do hereby proclaim April 2021 as Fair Housing Month throughout the city and encourage citizens to support policies and behaviors which ensure fair housing opportunities for all, signed this 30th day of March 2021. So that concludes the special presentations for tonight. And it brings us over into special order of business. So the first one is item 6, a public hearing to consider entering into an agreement for private development with Stone and Terrace LLC relative to the rehabilitation of 108 East 4th Street. Is there a motion to receive and file proof of publication?
So move. Second.
Been motioned and seconded.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
So are there any written communications filed, Madam Clerk?
I have no written communications on file, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, ma'am. That brings us to staff comments, and Shane Graham will be presenting tonight on this as our Economic Development Coordinator. Evening, Mr. Graham. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. The agreement before council tonight is 108 East 4th Street. It's a vacant building. It's been vacant for about 20 years now. Stone and Terrace LLC recently purchased that building as well as the vacant lot adjacent to it at the corner of 4th Street and Main Street. They're proposing to rehab that existing building into a new restaurant, and then they're going to utilize that vacant space, that green space at the corner, for an outdoor patio area. What the agreement would call for is the city's typical standard policy of offering a 5-year tax rebate on the increased valuation that this project would create. And they're estimating that the increased valuation that this project could possess would be upwards of $500,000. So based on that, they would get the tax rebate on the increased valuation only. This wouldn't affect the current building valuation. The current building valuation is about $204,000. So they still pay the tax on that. It's just the increased tax generation from the project that would get rebated over the 5-year time period. So with that, staff's recommending approval, and then I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Graham. Before that, I'll open it for public comment. Does anyone wish to speak on this item? And do we see any on Zoom? Okay. So then I'll consider the public hearing closed and move us into a resolution approving and authorizing execution of the agreement with Stone Terrace LLC relative to rehabilitation of 108 East 4th Street. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
The motion and seconded. Open it for council discussion and questions. Okay, and I'm seeing none. So motion and seconded, and this requires a roll call vote.
Cruz votes aye.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Next item, going into old business, is number 7, passing ordinance 2987, amending Chapter 26 zoning of the Code of Ordinances relative to adaptive reuse of institutional buildings upon its third and final consideration. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
It's been motioned
Second.
and seconded. Open it for council discussion, questions, or from the public? Council, or excuse me, any questions or comments? Seeing none, then it's been motioned and seconded and requires a roll call vote.
Aye.
Five voting aye, 2 voting nay, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Takes us to item 8, which is resolution extending the face mask mandate for the city of Cedar Falls. Is there a motion to approve this item?
So moved. Second.
It's been motioned and seconded. Open it for, first for council questions. And then I'll bring it back after public comment for council discussion on the item. But if there's any questions that council has to start with.
Was there a section in there that stated about the governor's current proclamation that we need to look at removing?
So if there's, let's see how we do this.
The second.
I'll open it.
Second paragraph on page 67, I think you're referring to.
So if that's something to discuss to amend, then we could entertain that as a motion to amend it to remove that paragraph. And then we could discuss the reasons for removal. Should I do that?
Sure, I would make a motion to remove the paragraph that talks about the governor's current proclamation that requires business gatherings.
Could you read that in its entirety? I know it's.
Yeah, I can.
Just so we know what's being.
Motion to remove the paragraph that states the governor's current proclamation requires that businesses and gatherings ensure social distancing of employees, customers, and attendees, increased hygiene practices, and other public health measures to reduce the risk of transmission of COVID-19 consistent with the guidance of the IDPH.
Okay, so it's been motioned to strike that paragraph from the resolution. Is there a second to discuss that?
Second.
Okay, so second to discuss and open it up for council discussion and reason why we'd want to remove that.
I just figured that it doesn't really jive with the current proclamation, as my understanding, unless I'm wrong with what her current proclamation is. I feel like we might as well keep it updated fully, or to the best of our ability.
We need to include the next sentence as well, I believe, then.
Yes, you would be correct. So we would have to amend the
So you could
amendment.
withdraw the amendment.
I'll withdraw it.
Yeah, and then they bring forward again.
And then bring forward another motion that states we shall amend this to remove the paragraph that states the governor's current proclamation requires that businesses and gatherings ensure social distancing of employees, customers, and attendees, increased hygiene practices, and other public health measures to reduce the risk of transmission of COVID-19 consistent with the guidance of the IDPH. And whereas the governor's current proclamation additionally requires the wearing of masks or face coverings in certain circumstances.
I'll second that.
And was that different from the first time you'd read it?
Yes,
Okay,
it
so-
was. It added the next, as Councilmember Miller pointed out, it actually needs to include the second part. So, my apologies.
So that's-
Yeah, that was it. Just figured if we're going to be going down this road, we might as well just keep updated. That's not necessarily what's current right now, so I'd, like to keep it current.
And that had been seconded by Dara. So motion and seconded, and any other discussion on that amendment before going back to or turning that into the main motion? Okay, and that's a voice vote, so all in favor of making this amendment to remove that paragraph that is not applicable, say aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, so I saw that passed, and that does then become the main body that we'll be discussing. So open it, let's see, for any public comment or discussion, or entertain that first. So do we have any public speakers for this item before going back to council? And then anyone from the gallery? Okay, Mr. Frine? Good evening again.
I'm just happy I got a mask that actually stays on. Today was the day that the governor came out and said all citizens are now eligible for the vaccine. Obviously, that doesn't mean that everybody's going to get it right away. But I think it would be a prime opportunity to start talking about what we do with vaccinated people. We've been having the vaccine for several months now, and I think 500,000 maybe Iowa citizens are fully vaccinated. I could be off on that number a little bit. But I think it's time that as a council we start talking about liberties for vaccinated people. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Frine. Other public comments? Seeing from the gallery, none. So yes.
We got one more, Mr. Mayor. Mark?
Okay, so Mark, if you give, even President Nook, name and address for the record, please, sir.
Yeah, Mark Nook, 2501 College Street in Cedar Falls. Thank you again for the opportunity to address the council, and especially thank you for putting the mandate in place in the first place. It really, I know, was courageous to put it in. Not a lot of cities have, but it has helped protect our citizens a great deal here in the Cedar Valley, and especially within Cedar Falls. So thank you. I am here again to speak in support of extending the mandate for 1 month. I do that for a couple reasons. One, the University of Northern Iowa will be in session for just a little over 1 more month. And while vaccines have started to be available and today started to be available to everyone in the community, we are seeing with these vaccines that even if one's been vaccinated, they can still be contagious and still spread this disease. In addition to that, we are seeing an uptick in the number of people who are positive in the state of Iowa, in Black Hawk County, and on our campus. In the state of Iowa, from the 19th of March through the 3rd of April, there's been a steady increase in the 14-day positivity rate. And that same sort of trend is in the Black Hawk County data. And we're starting to see a similar trend at the University of Northern Iowa, at least over the last week and a half or so. This uptick means that we haven't completely controlled this disease yet. The mass vaccinations really haven't hit a majority of our eligible population yet. We are on our campus engaged with the governor in trying to bring vaccines to the campus so that we can start some mass vaccination on campus for our students and for employees. It's important that we continue to maintain the safety measures both on campus and off campus, not only while the vaccine is being delivered, but on afterwards until we reach what is known as herd immunity. And even beyond that wouldn't be a bad idea. I'd urge us to continue to follow the CDC guidelines, which emphasize the use of masks, the use of social distancing, and hand washing to help control the virus in our environment. In just a little over a month, we will celebrate commencement. We've been very fortunate to be able to have face-to-face classes on our campus. A lot of that is because of the rather strict rules that we've put in place on mask wearing and mandating it in all of our public buildings, and the help that we've gotten from you as a city to put the mandate in place and to help the citizens and the businesses of our community understand the importance of wearing a face covering while you're in public, especially in indoor spaces, and continuing to social distance and wash your hands. So with all of those things, I think we're at a point where we should continue the mandate at least for another month. I would encourage you to consider extending it through June so that we continue to protect the health and safety of our citizens while our K-12 schools finish out their school year as well. I hope to be back in the very near future to be able to say it really is time not to extend the mask mandate, because the health of our citizens is in a place and the virus is in a place that we no longer need to have a mask mandate. But at this time, with an uptick in the virus, the positivity rate in our state and our county and our community, this isn't the right time to pull back, to take a step back and allow the virus to get out of hand. So thank you for considering this again tonight. I really appreciate the way that you have approached this throughout this year. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Nook. Any other speakers? Okay, seeing none, then bring it back to council. And just as a point of clarification, this extension would be until May 19th and would be up for automatic reconsideration on May 17th. So with that, I'll turn it over to council for discussion of this item. If anyone wishes to speak, Councilmember Dunn.
So just a few things. First, I do realize, just because the job I work in, and I work in a clinic, I don't work in the hospital. I was sent to the hospital at the very beginning of this pandemic a year ago. I'm grateful to be back at my home base. But I do know that when you're not exposed, if you've not been around someone or you've not talked to someone who's fearful for their life, or to know that that person you spoke to go to the ER, or to tell them to go to the ER, and then eventually to get a record saying that they've passed. I'm very well aware that if you've not been around COVID, or if you've had a mild case of COVID, this doesn't make sense to you. But it does make sense for me to continue to listen to the true experts, who I consider the infectious disease people, the true experts. I just feel like we're so close, and I think that there's a mentality that some folks think that some of us want to wear masks forever. I certainly don't want to wear masks forever. I'm lucky enough to be fully vaccinated right now. I'm considered immune. But until someone who's much smarter than me tells me I can't carry it and infect someone else, I will continue to listen to the CDC guidelines and the Black Hawk County Health Department. I am well aware that this is a divisive issue. I don't wish to hurt anyone, and that's why I'm going to listen to the science. I do want to remind folks, because I feel like I get emails sometimes, a private business is, even if we didn't have this mandate, to my understanding, they can require you to wear a mask all they want. So walking into a business and being defiant with the person who's asking you to put your mask on doesn't make any sense to me. So I am in favor of us extending this mandate for another time.
Thank you, Councilmember Dunn. Other speakers? Yes, Councilmember DeBurr.
I think that people know what they need to do. I have a lot of faith in the people. I don't think we need this mandate because I do feel that the people know what to do.
Thank you, Councilmember Durr. Other speakers or other council members wishing to comment? Okay, seeing none, then it's been motioned and seconded and requires a roll call vote.
Nay. Nay.
4 voting aye, 3 voting nay, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So that does pass, and the mandate will be in effect until at least May 17th, at which point it'll be up for an automatic extension consideration. So with that, that takes us over to new business. Looking in the consent calendar, the following items will be acted upon by a voice vote on a single motion without separate discussion, unless someone from the council or public requests that a specific item be considered separately. And just for clarification, a member of the public or council can pull any number of items from the list if there are points of discussion for those. So does any council member wish to pull an item 9 through 15? Okay, seeing none. Ask for the public. Does anyone wish to pull an item 9 through 15? Seeing from the gallery and then from Zoom. Okay, seeing none. So I will read those items then. And item 9 is receiving and filing the mayor's monthly report for this past month. 10 is approving the recommendation of the mayor relative to the reappointment of John Clopton to the Civil Service Commission. 11 is receiving and filing the resignation of Sue Armbrecht as a member of the Civil Service Commission, and we certainly wish Sue the very best as she moves into this new stage in her life. Item 12 is receiving and filing the Committee of the Whole minutes of March 15th. 13 is receiving and filing departmental run-through reports of February 2021. Item 14 is approving the application of Bonnie's for a cigarette, tobacco, nicotine vapor permit. And then 15 is approving applications for beer permits and liquor licenses. Is there a motion to approve these items?
So moved.
Second.
The motion and seconded. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? That does pass then. And brings us over to the resolution calendar. Does any the following items will be acted upon by a roll call vote on a single motion without separate discussion, unless someone from the council or public requests that a specific item be considered separately. Is there a desire to pull any items from 16 through 33 from council?
23.
So Councilmember Harding would like to pull item 23. And any others for tonight from council? And from the gallery, does anyone from the gallery wish to pull an item aside from 23? Okay, seeing none from the gallery and from Zoom. Okay, seeing none from Zoom either. So I will read those items minus 23. 16 is a resolution approving official depositories for the city. 17 is approving the transfer of funds for the completion of the Center Street Recreational Trail Project. 18 is a resolution approving transfer of funds for street repair for the Green Hill Road Extension Project. 19 is a resolution with final assessment for costs for a city property on 710 West 13th Street. 20 is the same for 1303 Walnut Street. 21 is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of a service agreement with Cities Digital Incorporated. 22 is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of a grant for the Main Street Reconstruction Project. 23 is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of a third agreement for, I should not read that. I'll skip that one. Item 24 is a resolution approving a Central Business District overlay site plan for facade improvements at 302 Main. 25 is a resolution approving a community development block grant for St. Patrick's Catholic School. 26 is a authorization of an agreement for a federally funded project for Valley Lutheran School for the CARES Act. 27 is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of a grant for a Northeast Iowa Food Bank through the CARES Act. 28 is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of a supplemental agreement for professional services with Snyder and Associates for the Downtown Streetscape Project. 29 is a resolution approving and filing bids and approving the low bid of Peterson Contractors for the 2021 street construction project. 30 is a resolution approving and accepting the contract and bond of Peterson for the street construction project. 31 is a resolution approving and accepting the contract and bond for municipal pipe tool for the 2021 sanitary sewer project. 32 is a resolution approving and accepting completion of public improvements in the Prairie Winds 5th edition. And finally, 33 is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of a professional service agreement with AECom for 2021 survey services. Is there a motion to approve these items minus 23?
So moved.
Second.
It's been motioned and seconded, and this requires a roll call vote.
Aye.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. That takes us back to item 23, which is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of a third agreement to amendment to agreement for private development with River Place Properties LC relative to the River Place Development Project. Is there a motion to approve this item?
So moved.
Second.
Been motioned and seconded. Open it for council discussion. Councilmember Harding, you brought this forward.
Kind of wanted to get some more background from staff. I know that this is a huge project, and of course, let Mr. Kittrell speak if he would, come up and speak. It's a huge project. Can you go over the numbers one more time? I know that the initial project was delayed some, and my hang up right now is I want to help out as much as possible, but I also don't want to overextend where we set a bad precedent in the future for other business owners to try to extend agreements past 10 when 5 is the norm. So any backfill and more information right now would be great.
Sure. I'll go over a couple points in the staff report just as an overview, and then we can turn it over to Mr. Kittrell to talk further if you'd like. So this development agreement dates back to July of 2012 is when the original development agreement was put in place. And at that time, the agreement called for up to a 15-year agreement, up to $15 million. So it was the first agreement of this magnitude, and it reflected the scope of the project. And there was a master plan in that original development agreement that also worked to reflect the scope of the development, the number of buildings that would occur with it, the public amenities that would occur. All of that was laid out in a very detailed original development agreement. And because of that length of time, obviously a project will see changes, as well as the city will see changes. And so we've had several amendments. That first amendment happened in 2016, which essentially extended the timeline for the development of what we refer to as the hotel property, the former broom factory site. And it also addressed several construction easements that we needed related to the levee project. And so that's the first time that the levee project shows up. We asked for temporary construction easements to be able to access areas of the levee, of which the River Place development is adjacent to the levee in a number of spots, but most particularly it was related to the hotel property there, where we needed to access and get in from that point. And so then that was the first amendment in 2016. And then in May of 2018, there was a second amendment to the agreement in which we again extended the timeline of the hotel. We also spoke to the completion of the plaza and the timeline of when that would happen, just to make sure that that was clear and that we understood what would happen there. We also updated the master plan since there had been a fair amount of changes over time, so we wanted to make sure that we spoke to that and agreed on that. And we extended the temporary construction easement for the levee as well through October of 2018. So here we are tonight considering the third amendment to the development agreement. Essentially, that is a request to extend the deadline of the incentives from the original agreement's deadline of 2027 to 2037, which would be a 10-year extension, requesting to collect the financial incentives, which are in the form of a tax rebate. So the taxes are paid and then they are rebated back to the developer. It would reduce that total financial incentive from $15 million to $10 million. And again, it's an up to amount, so it depends on how the valuations increase over time, that type of thing. A couple other elements, it extends the timeline to complete the plaza. Really what's remaining is the bathrooms, and those were to be done, I believe, in July of this year, and so we've extended that to October. Also, a full and unconditional public access easement across the plaza. There is a public access easement for the trail, which is along the south side of that property, as well as one that's in place for the plaza itself during events that have been coordinated with Community Main Street. And so this would be just a full and unconditional one across the entire plaza. Same thing, full and unconditional public access easement for the sidewalks in front of 200 and 300 State Street, as those are currently private property. Establishing a capital maintenance fund for the plaza with $50,000 to be deposited annually, so that is an addition with this development agreement amendment. We are stating the timeline to make the payment on the levee project, since there was a portion of that that was easier to construct along with the levee project, and that was agreed up front back with original developments, but it is time to complete that payment. And some decorative lighting along State Street, which developer and I have talked about several times, and we've been coordinating the timing of that with the streetscape project. So again, that is able to be done at this point. And then there were, last year, the council entertained a brick paver upgrade for the sidewalk in front of the plaza. And when the council approved that, we knew that we would potentially have a third amendment and potentially look at wrapping that into the rebate program for this development. So that is also in this third amendment. So that's kind of the highlights of what's in the third amendment. River Place has definitely been a significant development for our downtown. That was something that was a goal in 2012, that this would be a catalyst project for the downtown. We certainly feel that what has happened out there is a great project, and any project of this significance is going to have changes over time. So we certainly understand that and feel that it's important that the council consider these types of changes. With the impact of the levee project, staff has found that there should be some consideration there about the timeline, and so staff has talked with the developer, and we would recommend a 5-year extension based on the timeline of the levee. What you have in the packet in front of you is a signed agreement for a 10-year extension, so it does differ from what staff would recommend, and so at this point, staff would be recommending denial of what's on in the council packet tonight on your agenda. And should the council deny that, we would definitely be working with the developer to bring forward an alternate proposal for consideration.
Thank you, Director Sheets. With that, I'd like to open the floor. If Mr. Kitchell would like to come forward and speak on behalf of the project.
Yeah, I'm happy to do so. Hello, everybody. I think, we've gotten to know each other pretty well over the last 10 years, and as a developer, I guess it's my job to sort of stand up and talk a little bit about how this particular development has gone. And if you don't mind, I'm just going to go through a few bits of history to sort of remind everybody of how we got to here. A couple of things that I think are important for everybody to remember is when we started this project, this was really the first time that anyone had done a master plan and really put something together like this for the downtown area. We did it. I think that's important to know. There were 2 prior development efforts that happened prior to Eagleview, stepping in and taking this project on, and we put the master plan together ourselves with personal dollars that were involved in it. It was about 2 years worth of effort and about 300 cups of coffee, I think, involved in feedback. That's not exactly the process that I would recommend that we use, but it was the one that got us through in 2012. I think, it's important to note, you look back and you try and learn from what was, what the experiences were that we all had. And in 2012, everyone came through and said this is a model exactly for how the future projects should really happen in our community. And I'm real proud of what we've learned together. The fundamental couple of things that were in the agreement, and when Bob Seymour, who was then in the job of economic development, and I worked on the development agreement, he started out with a couple of things that said, number one is there should be no risk to the city that involved in this, that this really needed to be done 100% with private funding, and that included not only the original buildings that were proposed and put together, but also the amenities. And I want to focus tonight on sort of the amenities part of this, because I think this is where we can learn a lesson kind of collectively overall. The other thing that I wanted to point out, staff's report is exactly accurate. I think we're in one other really prime, and it's kind of one of those fundamental issues that came up, is there's an environmental issue. And the reason that the plaza is there today, and it's probably the thing that I'm going to be the most proud of for all of the work that we've done for all time, is that literally sat on top of an auto salvage yard. So as we all grew up there were piles of, scrap auto and the things that went along with them, and people were not as concerned environmentally in those days as what they are now. We stepped into the chain of custody and will never, as private developers, get out of that. And I think that's really, really an important thing to do, because even as we now know how much it costs to build the plaza, we still have the ongoing issue. And one of the assurances that we put into this particular amendment is that we would get a no further action letter from the DNR that we've done everything that they recommended for the remediation on it. We've done everything that was their recommendation. We have engineers that are working on it, but not surprisingly, here comes a fine thing. Who knew that in the 1800s there was a railroad that went through there, and there's an easement that's associated with it? Who knows how long it's going to take to get a railroad on it? We literally have gone through plats and replats, studies, title opinions, and everything else, and here at this hour, we find out that that's an issue. So how much will we spend in legal, and how long will that take? I don't know. We're going to try and find out. But those are the kind of things that step in. So I want to sort of just, if I can, talk a little bit about partnerships. And I promise I won't go very long on this, but I think this is a key issue for the council to really think about. Partnerships between private and public folks are hard. Public partners have things other than dollars and cents that they look at. And that's appropriate. That's exactly the kind of thing that public partners should look at. Private developers, unfortunately, have to look at what things cost. It's the nature of the thing. And I wish that you could see the number of investors that we have that have put money into our project, that have really stood up and said, we believe in Cedar Falls, we believe in the downtown, we believe in what we've been able to accomplish. And almost literally every single bank in town has invested in this project. And it's the kind of thing that they're looking at this right now and saying, is this a good experiment? Is this a good effort? If we're going to do this again, and if we're going to do this in another phase of downtown development, if we're going to do it in College Hill, those are the kinds of people that are asking the question right now, what kind of a partner is Cedar Falls? That's a question that I think this vote tonight really needs to address. So I just want to talk about that for just a second. As a partner, I think everybody would say we have done exactly what we said we would do. We've been up here 7 times with approvals, and we've had 7 unanimous votes of support. We've done everything that we said we were going to do. Councilman Harding, thank you for bringing this up. I really appreciate that. You asked about the numbers. Let's cover a few of those. When we originally put this project together, it was a $50 million project estimated. In fact, I added it up today. We've spent $55 million on it. So we've more than upheld, I feel like, our portion of this thing overall. We intended to build this in about 5 years. Who knew that things like the Army Corps of Engineers and the 2016 flood would slow things down? Who knows those things? The economics of those are real. We pay interest every single year for those things regardless of what happens. Who knew that the COVID would come around? The plaza was finished really last year. We're extremely disappointed. The whole downtown is disappointed that the plaza really wasn't available to help draw people into downtown. Downtown desperately needs the plaza and the traffic, and a great year. It was a terrible year last year. This is a year that we're really wanting to do those things. So,
and Mr. Kittrell,
yeah.
We are at 5 minutes now, but would anyone object to granting 3 minutes additional time?
I
Okay,
can
yes,
do it
please,
in
go right
2,
ahead,
I
sir.
promise. $15 million was 30%. 30% of the total project overall on it. I want to point out that what we are asking for is we are agreeing to move that number down to 10 million. So 10 million out of 55 million spent onto it is only 18%. So we're doing this with less than half, or just about half, of what was originally done. The reason we're asking for the extra term, and we'll probably run into the $10 million before we get to the 10 years on it, is we need to finance this through the bank with a 15-year mortgage. It's a $2.5 million expenditure that we put into the plaza. It's an amenity that was done 100% by private dollars. So is it something that's going to be there? Yes, I think so. So I just want to close and say I think that the Downtown Vision Plan is exactly the kind of project and plan that the future of the downtown in our community should look at. It's led by planning efforts that the city has done. Developers like us don't look at code and the kind of questions that you guys are dealing with, parking and things, as problems. We want you guys to, weigh in and give us guidance on those things, and then we know what we can do. So I think the key issue really right now is essentially, can we step in? Is this the kind of private-public partnership that you want? Is this community the kind of public partner that's sending messages out to people? We need young people, we need housing, all of the new kinds of things. I'm asking, as representing developers, please consider this. My final question to you is, I'm not sure on the motion, is a yay vote to deny as it's written in here, or is it this essentially, how does this work out procedurally?
If the, is that your final comment then? Okay, you feel free to take a seat. I'll answer that here.
Okay.
So as it's written, it says a resolution approving and authorizing execution of a third agreement for private development for replaced properties. So if this passes, then that contract as it was put forward will be approved by council. If it's voted down, then as I understand it, the contract is basically void, and it would be up to yourself and staff to come together and decide on a new contract to bring forward to council, perhaps at the next meeting. So does that clarify? Okay. So with that, I'll open it for council questions on this, and then public comment for questions, and then back to council for final discussion. So does council have any initial questions on this to staff or to Mr. Kittrell? Yes, Councilmember Harding?
So we're moving the amount total that could be recouped from 15 down to 10, and it was stated that we probably would reach 10 before time. Do we have estimates on a timeline on how long it would take to get to 10, just out of curiosity?
Would staff agree with that 7-year estimate?
I don't know offhand, but I remember when we calculated what a 5-year extension would be, it was going to be just under 10 million, so it was somewhere around the 9 million amount.
Okay,
Mayor?
question?
Mayor?
Yes, Councilmember Miller.
So then, the $50,000, does that change if we don't approve this as a $10 million, or excuse me, a 10-year extension? Do all these terms change in here too? I would assume they do.
If it's not approved tonight, the original agreement stands with the 2 amendments that are in place. So the original agreement is till 2027, up to 15 million. That, by our calculations, won't be able to be reached at this point at all. About half that, if not less than half, actually. And then there are things from our past agreements about the plaza being completed, including the bathrooms.
I was
And the levy
specifically
payment, that type of thing.
the maintenance, the $50,000 a year in maintenance.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That I would assume would change too.
Correct. That's not provided in any agreement right now. So that's a new item with this third amendment.
Councilmember DePere.
Well, the staff had recommended denial. Was it only because you wanted 5-year, or was it more than that?
Yeah, the term had gone back and forth, and right before the packet was due, we received a signed agreement at 10 years, which the draft that we had provided was a 5-year. So yes, the term was one of the primary issues. There were some things that, when the term was shortened, came out of the agreement. So we would just need a chance to negotiate with the developer again about those as well.
And can you explain also a little bit more about that donation to the river project?
A former draft, not what you have in your packet tonight, but a former draft at one point had proposed making a donation to the river project of $250,000. That came out when staff said the term needed to be shorter just because of what we could justify based on the levee project. That donation is not part of any former agreement. It just came up as a point to discuss with this one.
Yes, I'll allow you to speak since you've invested in the project here.
Just one comment, and I would say we did negotiate quite a lot with staff on this. Actually, it went on for a number of months, and finally got to a point where when the parking project basically came out, the $5 million that was proposed for the parking ramp, we simply took out of it. And what I thought was the safest and best faith way to bring this back to council was essentially to do exactly the terms as they were approved in the letter of intent. So the letter of intent passed summer without the parking ramp is exactly what's in front of you. As Stephanie has said, that particular donation wasn't in the letter of intent. I'm certainly not opposed to the Whitewater project. We're very excited about it and likely will make a contribution. It just didn't need to be part of this amendment.
Okay, thank you, sir. Other questions or comments from council or questions? So with that, if there's anyone, yes, Councilmember Miller. And then Councilmember Cruz after.
Councilman Harding's point about setting a precedent, I think, is valid here, but what are the implications if this, I mean, we're down to Mr. Kittrell just said 7 years versus 10 years versus 5 years. Are there implications to the city otherwise? To downtown?
Well, as long as this rebate agreement is in effect, it's a rebate back to the developer for the taxes paid. When the agreement ends, then those funds become available for a project in the downtown where the city could certify a debt and could be repaid through the TIF. You know, our downtown streetscape project is a perfect example of how our downtown TIF is funding a downtown project.
Sure. Thank you.
And Councilmember Cruz.
Thank you. A couple questions of clarity here. You're stating that the sidewalks would be a permanent easement or transferred to the city as a right-of-way. Which is going to happen?
Right now in the development agreement, we've stated a permanent public access easement.
So then the developer's in charge of maintaining the sidewalks on into the future, as opposed to us taking possession, so to speak?
Yes, and the way we typically run it is, you know, when we do the sidewalk inspections, the adjacent property owner is responsible for maintenance of a sidewalk.
So that'd be standard, okay. Another point, sometime, I think it's close to 2 years ago, Mr. Kittrell and I and city staff met and we discussed some things about these different projects and River Place and so on. And one of the things the developer assured us was that he was going to install a couple doors on the river side of the 300 block building. And I want to make sure that that continues to be something that the developer is going to be doing and incorporate that into this agreement.
I'm seeing a head nod there, so from Mr. Kittrell.
Okay.
Okay. Back to council. I was seeing anything from the public as comments. Okay, anything from the gallery otherwise? So any final thoughts from council on this?
Just a question.
Yes, Councilor Dewar.
So if a person votes no on this, as I understand it, it could go back to staff to discuss the 5-year.
Correct.
Which is what they recommended. But as I understand from Mr. Kittrell, he needs a 15-year mortgage, so you actually need 15 years? No.
Okay, so if no other questions or comments on this, then
I do have one quick one, Mr. Mayor.
yes, Councilmember Cruz.
A little clarity here on full and unconditional public access easement across the plaza parcel. It is my understanding that the plaza is going to be turned over to the city at some point in time, and I'd like some clarity on when that is supposed to take place, or we can get that determined.
And I have Mr. Kitchell coming forward, so if staff's all right with that, Mr. Kitchell can
Is that okay?
speak about it.
Yeah. We've discussed this at length, and unfortunately, let's, again, just be clear on a couple of things. This is an amenity. This is a public amenity, and it's not a profit-generating entity. For us, we believe it's a neighborhood association, or a neighborhood amenity, and we've actually got about $7,000 a year that are coming for maintenance and related things from the neighborhood that are coming through there. This commitment also puts $50,000 a year in capital maintenance, because there's a concern on staff's part to make sure that this isn't somehow neglected and it comes back to the city and related things. So essentially what we've done is we've crafted, and the other part of it is we have to maintain it in private property for it to be collateral so that we can borrow against it. I mean, banks just require collateral. That's just not a negotiable point. So essentially what we crafted was we're moving this into a not-for-profit corporation. It's called the River Place Neighborhood Association. There's a date certain in the agreement that that will happen, and there's all the public access, because we know and want this to be the on and off point for the whole Whitewater project that I know you guys are working on next. So
Thank you, sir.
But I think just to clearly state, there's no plan right now for ownership to transpire. So.
Councilmember Harding.
Was there, in the second agreement, was there ownership, was that in the agreement to transpire?
No.
So it's, okay, just making sure, clarity.
Okay, so if any other.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes,
Quick one.
Councilmember Cruz.
Can we have a date for the doors to be installed at the same time that the plaza bathrooms are completed, by October 1st, 2021?
Well, I'm seeing a head nod. Is that, I don't know if we can legally commit to that here, or is that already stated in the contract?
It is not in the development agreement right now.
Okay, I am getting a head nod for whatever legal value that has. So with that, any other comments or questions from council? Seeing none, then I'll just say before we go to a motion and a second on this, certainly this vote would have no impact.
We have a motion.
Oh, what's that? Yeah, so before I take the vote on it, I suppose, just want to say, I can speak for council and how grateful we are with the relationship with Riverview, or excuse me, Eagle View and River Place partnerships, and how this has been a great relationship for the city and for the people of Cedar Falls. And so with that.
Mayor, can I just add?
Yes, please.
I don't want to drag this on, but I do want to say Mr. Kittrell is exactly right with everything that he's promised down there. I think it's turned out wonderful. I think it's a beautiful amenity to the city. I think this is just one of those cases where staff couldn't justify the time period, but our negative recommendation, no way, shape, or form indicates what good he's done down there. So I'd just like to thank him for that.
Thank you for clarifying. So with that, it's been this item for approving and authorizing execution of a third amendment for agreement with River Place Properties relative to the River Place Development Project has been motioned and seconded and requires a roll call vote.
Aye.
Six voting aye, one voting nay, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so that does pass as stated in the packet, and can move forward for signature. So that takes us out of the resolution calendar and into ordinances. So item 34 is passing an ordinance amending Chapter 2 Administration of the Code of Ordinances relative to mayor and administrator duties upon its first consideration. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Motioned and seconded. Open it for council discussion or questions. We did talk about this in our last committee of the whole.
I guess I'd have a question for Kevin.
Yes, Councilmember Derrick, go ahead.
Yeah. There's been I've heard a lot of people concerned about a power grab either by the mayor or by the city administrator, and I don't think any of that is happening. I guess if Kevin could clarify, did we just pretty much not just make things a little bit more current? I don't see the role of either city administrator or mayor changing greatly. It's just more clarifying what's been done for time. Am I wrong about that? Are there significant changes?
I agree that the proposed amendments really for clarification purposes to eliminate duplication between the two sets of duties and really to more accurately reflect actual practice. And so that's the reason, not really any substantive policy changes. And so this is the third time council will see this, these proposed amendments. It's narrowly tailored and hopefully reflects discussion by council after each time we've gotten together and talked about this. And so hopefully this does reflect council discussion.
Very good, thank you.
Councilmember Dunn?
Okay, so I've also heard concerns from citizens, and I appreciate that. I do think we all agree that we are not trying to take power away from the elected office of the mayor. One section, though, that keeps coming up to me is on page 314, number 5, the part that's crossed out, the mayor shall represent the city in all negotiations properly entered into in accordance with law and ordinance. The mayor shall not represent the city where this duty is specifically delegated to another officer by law or ordinance. I guess I'm probably saying the same thing that Councilman Dara just said. That's not saying, if we take it out, it's not saying that whoever's elected to that office can't sit in and on negotiations. It's just updating what has happened. The concern I get from citizens is it's not about the two people that are serving in these roles right now. It's about the future people who serve in these roles and not wanting to take any power away from the elected official. So that number keeps coming back up. There's a concern that, that I think the citizens expect that the mayor is sitting in on those things. And I'm not in that seat. So, but when we cross that out, it doesn't mean that the mayor cannot sit in on those things, correct?
Is that directed to me?
Yes, please.
I'm happy to answer. The actual practice is the sitting down in the same room negotiating. It is done by city administrator, other staff. However, the mayor in section 2-187A still retains and exercise all authority over the conduct of city government. So the mayor could, in fact, have input on negotiation if the mayor chooses to. But the day-to-day operation, these changes would more reflect that.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilmember Cyrus.
I was going to try and remain real quiet on this. Just because things have slowly changed doesn't make them right. I truly believe that an elected official should always be in charge of our city. I think they're elected by the citizens, and they can be thrown out by the citizens. I believe that's the top job in our city, and I don't think anything like this should be changed. That's all.
Thank you, Councilmember Cyrus, and I completely agree with you. The mayor should have final authority over the conduct of city government, and because of your questions in the last committee of the whole about this, we did add that specifically to section 2187 to ensure that that's clear. The mayor is basically the final say with the executive branch of government. So thank you for bringing that up again. Anyone else from council for questions? And if we have any, do we have any public comment on this?
Yes, we do, Mr. Mayor.
So
Jim Skane.
I'll wait just a moment for calling Mr. Skane. I just wanted to make sure we had that prepped. But is anyone from council? Yes, Councilmember DeBeer?
Well, doesn't the word shall mean that you must in legal terms? Like when it's on here, like the very first one says that the chief executive officer of the city shall have the power to oversee all functions. That means you must oversee all functions, doesn't it? I always thought the word shall meant you must.
Right. And as a mayor, I am overseeing
Yeah.
all functions. That doesn't change, right?
Yeah.
Any other comments from council on this? Then not, then I'll go to Mr. Skane. So the floor is yours, sir. Give you just a moment to connect in there. Okay, we're not hearing you. You are unmuted, but we're not hearing you, sir. Give it another moment here. Okay, unfortunately, Mr. Skane, we're not able to connect you. But there is going to be 2 more times for this item to be brought forward. Are we okay now?
I'm sorry.
Oh, go right ahead. We hear you fine now, Mr. Skane. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I had some difficulty with my star 6. But anyway, the state of Iowa says that the official form of government for Cedar Falls is mayor council. The state of Iowa also says that there can be an assistant to the mayor. In putting this together, the language that was first passed in 1970 and has essentially continued to today, in this process has been materially altered and has essentially taken power away from the mayor and put it more in the hands of the city administrator. Now, in this particular process, I've listened very carefully, and there have been many suggestions about how to reduce the power of the mayor, but I have not heard any suggestions as to how to decrease the power of the city administrator. And so it seems like putting this into a motion, and I'm not sure what the language of the ordinance is. I don't think that has been read yet, but I would think that it would be important to know what the language of the ordinance is. But in any case, in this mayor-council government, much of the power has been ceded to the assistant. And I think that it's important to look at the role of the city administrator. And I think it's important to reduce the power of the city administrator. But this discussion thus far has not addressed that. But I do think that the city and the people of the city need to know what the language of this ordinance is, and that the role of the city administrator needs to be discussed and, from my point of view, reduced so that the mayor-council form of government operates as it should. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Skane. Any other speakers from online or in the gallery? Yes, Mr. Frine. Go ahead, sir.
I guess my only question would be if there's a way to kind of put this thing to bed once and for all. The mayor's term is 2 years, council is 4. We could be doing this song and dance every 2 years, trying to figure out what's up and what's down, changing things. Some consistency for the citizens would be nice. So there's got to be some way to kind of put this thing to bed for once and for all. Thanks.
Mr. Kittrell.
Just a couple of quick, I think, observations more than anything else. Speaking as a gray-haired old resident of town, I guess I'll state the obvious and say, I think we were very fortunate for a number of years to have John Cruz and Dick McAllister in these roles. I think because they were in those roles for so long, a lot of this just didn't get talked about, and people sort of knew inherently, of developers, citizens, whatever the case, how things worked. I commend the two of you in sort of going through this exercise, because I think that generationally now we're in a different spot. There are different people in these. I think inherently when unfortunately you're in these roles and you're talking about yourself but trying not to talk about yourself, it's hard. And I think, there's been good discussion about, is a part-time mayor a good idea? I think that discussion said no. Now there's a clear discussion saying, okay, how is essentially things going to work in the Green and Gaines administration as opposed to the Cruz and McAllister? And I think the previous comment is, exactly what everybody's asking the question. How does this work? How do we go forward? Is this going to change every 2 years, or when we have, a new mayor into this? It's been very clear in history. We're one of only just a handful of communities, I think, in the state of Iowa that have a full-time mayor. As a full-time mayor with a city of this size, I think it makes sense that the mayor is in charge, the mayor runs things. Essentially, the partnership with the city administrator is exactly the way that things should run, but it's careful. It needs to be carefully thought about. So I'm supportive of where this is going, but I think this is going to be something that it's going to be the devil's in the details, and it's going to be talked about a lot in the in the upcoming election, and probably every 2 years thereafter.
Thank you, Mr. Kittrell. I would agree generally with the sentiment, but the one comment I would or term I would take issue with is the idea of a partnership between the mayor and the administrator, because it's very clear in the code, and it's very clear in our relationship too, from my working relationship with the administrator, that he works for me. I'm his supervisor. It is a very serious responsibility that I have, especially to be able to properly evaluate the administrator, and I certainly rely on the council for input to do that properly, but I would not characterize our relationship as a partnership. We work together, and we work together very well, but I think that that's the great concern of the residents, is that the mayor or the administrator has too much power. Well, as I'm learning more about the job and seeing where it's appropriate to insert myself in the decisions, I don't necessarily need to be part of all the negotiations. Some are very routine, but I do have to be aware, and I want to make sure that whoever follows me is very aware of where the mayor has vital roles to play. And these ordinance updates help to quantify that and clarify that in my mind. And they were carefully drafted to reflect that. So with that, any other from the gallery comments? Then back to council. Yes, Councilmember Miller.
Question for Kevin. Can the mayor fire the city administrator?
That function lies with the city council.
Say that again, if you would.
The termination of city administrator position, that power lies with the city council.
With some of the verbiage here, can it not be construed another way?
We don't have all of the, remember we zeroed our focus into just the duty ordinances, but there are other ordinances that address removal of the city administrator.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from council before a vote on?
Can I jump in?
Yes, please.
It says that in section 2-215, which is part of this, it wasn't changed in these recommended changes. It says the city council may remove the city administrator at any time without cause by a majority vote of its members. So removal clearly is vested with the city council, and that hasn't changed.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Then seeing none, it's been motioned and seconded to pass the ordinance amending Chapter 2 Administration of the Code of Ordinances related to mayor and administrator duties upon its first consideration. And this requires a roll call vote.
Nay.
5 voting aye, 2 voting nay, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So that does pass to be brought forward in one more additional consideration and discussion, and then an additional consideration for a total of 3 considerations in the next 2 meetings. So with that, brings us forward into allowing bills and claims. Item 35, is there a motion to approve bills and claims from April 5th?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and seconded. Any discussion from council, the public? Motion and seconded, and requires a roll call vote.
Aye.
All voting aye, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Do we have any council referrals tonight? Didn't see any in the packet.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilmember Cruz.
Thank you. Last council meeting, I think it was March 15th, I asked about getting the planning and zoning work sessions recorded. And my understanding of the discussion was that it was agreed upon that they were going to do that. And then 2 days later, there was a planning and zoning work session that wasn't recorded, and I'm wondering why. Because
Councilmember Cruz, do you
as
have
I mentioned,
Councilmember Cruz, do you have a referral for tonight first? We can cover that in updates, but is there a referral you want to make? A
okay,
motion?
well, I'm just following up on last referral, so that's fine.
Okay, thank you. So any council referrals tonight? All right, so then moving into updates, yes, Councilmember Cruz, if you want to continue your discussion, that's fine.
In the explanation I gave last time was that if the planning and zoning is making policy decisions or discussing policy, I think it's prudent to have that recorded so that the public can refer back to it and how something evolved, and likewise with staff, or staff and city council, because we can't always watch these meetings or attend them when they're held because we get other things going on. So what do we need to do to make sure that the planning and zoning work sessions are recorded?
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Cruz. And I wasn't aware that they hadn't been recorded if it was a council directive to do so. For staff, we have a comment on that?
The planning and zoning work sessions, a majority of them were recorded. They had 3 or 4, and there's only 1 that was not recorded. I don't know the date offhand of the one that was not recorded, but most of them were.
Okay, and so going forward, the plan is to record
Yes.
those work sessions?
Yes.
In here? Okay, so apologize for that, Councilmember Cruz, but they will be recorded in the future.
Okay, I guess I looked and there was none that I could see, but I have another update if I may.
Okay, certainly, go ahead.
Actually, I wanted to respond to the public comment earlier regarding the lobbyist. And it was my understanding from years past, staff or the council would answer to some of the public comments, but maybe we changed that process. But regarding the city hiring a lobbyist, that's standard procedure
Councilmember
for
Cruz,
many years.
Councilmember Cruz, I'm going to have to interrupt on that with Attorney Rogers. My question for Attorney Rogers is, with updates, they're typically intended for small like pieces of information. With this, to me, it feels like it ties back into a discussion of something that was in the agenda outside of the agenda format. So do you have a consideration on that, Mr. Rogers, for me?
From what I'm hearing from Councilmember Cruz is he's updating the city's status in terms of its lobbyist firm, and I don't see that that's a problem with the agenda or anything of the sort.
Okay, so it's not a deliberation on whether we should have lobbyists, as long as it's a question about.
That's already been done.
Okay, so as long as it's just a question about the status of lobbyists, that's perfectly fine. So go ahead, Councilmember Cruz, I apologize.
Thank you, no worries. I've worked at lobbying in Des Moines for about 12 years now. I'm not a hired lobbyist, but it's important that the city has a lobbyist. Almost all of the bigger cities do that I'm aware of, Des Moines, Ames, Iowa City, and so on. And the legislative process is rather involved to move legislation along. You've got, your legislative service agency that you run bills through to get initially compiled. How you amend bills, you go through debates and subcommittee, full committee, and full floor debates, and so on. So I think it's very justified that the city has a lobbyist, and it shouldn't be a surprise. I don't know if it was that way to the speaker, but we've had one for quite a few years, and I think it's important. Just wanted to bring that to the attention. And I thought, just to go back to my first comment, are we no longer allowed as staff or council to answer to a concern that's brought up in public update? Or public comment, I mean?
Well,
I thought that we did that on a regular basis.
Sure. Well, I want to make sure that I'm following the rules of that the council set. As I look at it,
the reason I asked that is I recall in years before you were mayor that on a regular basis, if somebody made a comment or a concern, staff would reply and answer to that concern, or a city council person would. And I think that would be prudent. And I tried to do that earlier, and I thought maybe I was interrupting during the public comment section, but I recall previously that I would ask questions and staff would answer concerns of the citizens. So
I'll have to refer to that in the rules, Councilmember Cruz, but it says for public forum. I may have conflated the two, for public forum and just regular public comment, but it says for at least public forum, no formal action on the subject presented by the speaker may be taken by council other than a referral to staff or committee. And it says, I don't remember where, but it says about not debating items that are before public forum. So if I did conflate those two, I apologize. I'll be more careful in the future.
The prohibition, Mr. Mayor, the prohibition is taking action on an item brought up in public forum, but responding to a question or making a comment would not, I would not interpret that as taking formal action on such a matter.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I stand corrected.
You got one more, Mr. Mayor, if I may?
Yes, Councilmember Cruz. Go ahead, sir.
As we all recall, probably about a month ago, we changed and turned down the Sturgis Falls Agreement funding that was set aside for things like the Kids Way, the parade, and the Overland Park entertainment. And my understanding is Sturgis Falls is spending, on average, the last 4 or 5 years, $37,000 to operate those components of the festival to make it a success for the citizens. And I'm wondering how that is proposed to get paid now. It doesn't seem like there's any funding mechanism for that, and I know the other council members, a number of them turned it down, but just to be aware, there's a lot of contributions by the city that needs to get paid for, and there's no formal agreement that there used to be for like 35 years.
So for staff, if there's an update or any thought on that?
I guess the only update to the contract is since the last time it was before council with proposed amendments made to it, it's been sent to the Sturgis Falls group and awaiting their board approval, which is, I believe, Wednesday of this week.
Okay, so we're still waiting on that contract to come forward again. Okay, any other updates from council? Seeing none, then I'll turn it over to staff for updates. And I would ask if for Director Olson, if you could provide a quick brief on Sexual Assault Awareness Month and city actions for that.
Yeah, certainly, Mr. Mayor. It is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. So what we're working with is the Riverview Center. They're the organization that provides advocates for our victims to provide educational through social media and our local media sources, TV, print, and radio. And we've also, we'll notice on the back of all our squads, we have teal ribbons, which we're hoping will provide awareness to the public as well.
Okay, thank you. And for Mr. Gaines, did we have any other updates?
I don't think so, Mayor.
Okay, I know for Director Shaggy, I had asked earlier about the city's activities for citywide cleanup week. Have just like a quick note on that.
Sure. I guess the only thing that I would like to mention is that any resident or organization or group that would like to participate in the cleanup week from April 19th to 24th, that the city will be offering collection bags. Those can be picked up at the Public Works or the city transfer station. The only thing we would ask is that upon the collection and filling of the bags is that you let us know where those are placed. We'd prefer if they're placed around a park shelter or one of the more major intersections that we can collect those at. And if you could let us know where those are at and when it's completed, we will go pick them up. So,
okay, thank you. So with that, if no other staff updates, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
So moved.
Motion and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.